Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
And I'll call a meeting to order. Adjustments to the agenda was
a question about universal free meals and how that works. It's called by the state and the feds call it universal free meals, but it's free breakfast and lunch for the students of Westminster.
right. So that'll be on the 7 a.m. And that's something you brought up. Nice. And then,
Oh, it's right here.
yeah, there it is. But there was another one was, and this can be under 8A, a discussion about the transition boards for board members for Westminster. So, so let's go through and consider the minutes of Tuesday, March 19. Are there any additions or corrections? Anything that you noticed? Okay. Then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as printed. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Great. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Communications and public comments.
Just here for the shop.
All right. Hi, David. How'd you know? Well, thank you and welcome. Policies, nothing to talk about this time. So let's go on to reports, superintendent, assistant superintendent reports, which are pages 9 to 13. Anything to highlight in this room?
Well, I'm going to tell you, when we look at the superintendent's report, is kind of speaks for itself. We're still looking at the landmark professional development. We're not sure, but we may end up just having, when we look at landmark professional development initiative, what we're discussing is on these 5 workshops, they're actually, they have a series of courses too, and we might be looking, we haven't finalized the plan, but a leader, a regular ed leader, and a special ed leader from each school to take these courses and get graduate credit and certified in these areas as far as different disabilities and executive function and behaviors. So we're still working at that. We will have a final answer probably by next month. So our grant has been approved, the amendment. The first grant was approved in November. It took another 4 months to get it approved, but the amendment. So each school is going to be getting a large amount of curriculum for interventions, and we're having our parent nights. Westminster is all set, and I'm sure Doug will talk about it, having their parent night May 2nd. That's exciting. Lots and lots of books for everyone, and they're going to be talking about how they can how parents can help their young children at home to read and really impress the importance of reading at home. Good readers, strong readers, read about 10,000 more words a day than students who struggle. So the idea is to get everyone reading. And we're looking at our next generation science standards. We'll be working on that curriculum last week in April. We're excited about that. Mathematics training is still going on. We the grant that we're working on for the Bellows Falls Middle School, and we're working together to work on some education there. The district level, Title I, Home to School Liaisons are putting together a program where our young families can go to Mount Charter Museum. We're having a field trip. They're taking them on a Saturday. It's all paid for by Title I. They have some wonderful events planned. And again, Andy talked about these student support services. He was here last month and talked a lot about that. Act 173, we'll be doing work on that this summer. Once we get a little bit beyond Act 46, then we get to step right into Act 173. And Harley wrote his report, and Edie's here. She could speak to anything, and we're still working on that website project. Ricky Adams is doing a great job. We're going live with the new website on July 1st, and we're really excited because even today I was talking with Harley, and there's so many items we can put under the nutrition tab, to give so much information. So we've ordered 50 more Chromebooks for the high school from Title IV grants. So those will be coming along as well. So that's the news that we have.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good report. Okay. Then we have the principal's report.
Sure. I took paper copies out. I got it into the system a little bit too late for it to be printed traditional way. It's kind of short. I didn't have too much more from the last time I met, but just some quick updates. We have a winter sports forum on April 11th at 5:30. Just to talk about how things went this year and just to get some kind of feedback on ideas or possible changes going forward into next year. And just I thought it was kind of an alarming number that last year we spent $3,500 on chemo, and this year we spent $6,100, and just some significant shifts there that worth us exploring other options, and I think, or at least bringing that up to people to talk about. Every trimester when we do our track my progress, we kind of share out the results, and so I kind of attached those in color because I feel like that's a little bit easier to read. And I kind of just gave a couple of quick synopsis that people were feeling really excited, and I think that's key. There was teachers who were feeling success, and particularly for certain individual students, they were feeling some success that was exciting for them. On average, we're kind of like having the same trajectory as we've had over the last couple of years, which is, I guess, in some ways, but it's also sort of giving all the doing the new curriculum and all that sort of thing you would expect some kind of implementation dip, and it doesn't seem like we're experiencing that this year, and so that is sort of the plus side of that. And so those are kind of there. I think Lynn already kind of talked about, we have our play night coming up, first one for preschool tomorrow, and I'll share out more and send a flyer around with our parent engagement night that's coming up in May, which focuses on successful readers, helping create successful readers. Jamie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug? It always kind of blows my mind how different classes are.
Sure.
And, or maybe the tests are different for each grade.
Yeah, I mean, like the things that you can't see on here that would probably be inappropriate to overshare would just be like the number of students who, I guess there are a number of students on here, but if you look at those, that can sometimes influence how much any one kid can. These are what I typically have reported in the past, just to kind of keep it consistent. We have this percentile ranking is track my progress is preferred methodology. They do have other things which are interesting. I don't know how scientific they are as far as grade level equivalencies and that sort of thing, but this is what we've traditionally reported on. So.
Why do you think? I mean, you think every school would be a little bit slow, and the student would be a little bit slower in the fall after going out on summer vacation and so on. And why do you think we often see we're a little extra that way in the fall, but then we tend to catch up or be better than the average? The average student is better than the average student Vermont-wide or whatever by the spring.
I don't know, that's a good question, because in theory this test is supposed to be scaled for the year. So like you take it in the fall and it's supposed to be whatever you are in the fall, like in theory, you know, it should be, and then it gets harder because kids should know more, and you know, so you know, again, it's one test and the other one system, so I don't have a good answer for that. Certainly every time we take the test, there's a lot of backyard philosophy about, like, you know, like, oh, we took it too early, or we needed more time, or you know, beginning of the year, well, we haven't really gotten them back into the rhythm and flow of things. So it is curious, but we do follow this very typical pattern every year where it's, you know, we're kind of like, oh, we're doing okay, and then, oh no, we're scared, and then, oh, we're doing great, and then like, and then at the end of the year, some, you know, some grades continue to go along, and some don't. So.
Any other questions for Doug?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doug. Edie, I don't think you're sharing any big numbers today, but you've got some stuff to share.
Yes. The ed spending formula, or at least a portion of it, as far as the students go. I'll wait until everyone has a copy. And I'll explain what I did for comparison purposes. How we go from enrollment to ADM to equalized pupils. So Doug sent me the fall census, which was dated November 2nd. I'm not really sure when they wanted the cutoff for the statewide longitudinal data. I think it was before November. So if you look at the enrollment, total enrollment, pre-K through 8, the school has 274 students, where what was reported on the SLDS was 265. So there's a 9 student difference. Now, I'm not sure. I think you might have students from other towns maybe in some of your classes, maybe with Heather, or you would count them on enrollment, but they would get dropped off if their town of residence was not Westminster. And so then we look at the statewide longitudinal data system, ADM. And basically what they do is they count, and I'm pretty sure it's 30 days. So for the first 30 days, if a child comes in on day 16, they're half a child. If they start at the beginning of the school year and are there for the full 30 days, they're a whole child. So it's basically the students who are enrolled, irregardless of whether they attended or not. But it's when they came in and when they left during that beginning period of time at the start of school. So we come out to 260.83 students. Now, if you look at the AOE's average daily membership for the current year, we're only off by 1 student. it went from 260.83 on the report to 259.83, and there may have been a residency issue. So what the state will do is if the student is in attendance in 2 different places, then we only get to count, of course, the piece while they were here. And what the state does under the Agency of Education, they take the average daily membership from last year, and then they take this year's and they average it. So they've got, behind the scenes, they've got a formula. I came out with 266.02. They actually came out with 266.03. So this is what goes into the equalized pupil formula. They add in the state place students. They take out the 0.54 of every preschool student, because we only get to count a preschooler as 0.46. They're only required to go 10 hours a week, and somewhere someone came up with 0.46 as the weighting factor. Then the secondary students, which on this is only your grades 7 and 8, you get an extra 0.13 or 13%. Then poverty students, you get an extra 25%. And the students who English is not their primary language at home, you get an extra 20%. Then you get the total weighted long-term or 2-year student count. And then they have the equalizing ratio, which runs around between 94 and 96%. This year, it's used in calculating FY20's equalized pupils, is 0.94817. So that gets us to the 250.98, which once everything was resolved between the reporting on the statewide longitudinal data system and the AOE's calculation, that's what we have for equalized pupils in the tax formula. That's what it's all based upon. So, but I thought this way it would be easier for you to see. Now, Doug should be counting all the kids for enrollment that he has in every single class. However, if their town of residence is not Westminster, it gets pulled out, and then that town gets to count that child or those children. So everything is based on town of residence. And then Bellas Falls Union High School gets the 9 through 12 for the 4 towns. But yeah, this is how it's calculated. And because they didn't have us do the fall census, which we've always done in the past, along with the SLDS report, it took them a long time to get all the bugs out of the SLDS, and we had way more kids than what were ours, and I don't think I finally got the actual correct ADM numbers until the middle of February. And I usually have that by the end of December. So I wish they'd had us do both reports. Then we could have moved forward with the census for the equalized pupils until they got the new reporting system bugs worked out, but yeah, we had quite a mess as far as town of residence goes. But everyone did, and when I went to my business managers meeting the second week in February, one district were missing all their elementary students. So, and they have elementary schools. So it wasn't cleaned up for everybody until like the middle of February. So they need to, when they start a new reporting system, they need to keep the old one intact so we can kind of, you know, do an apples to apples comparison. And this year they didn't. But this is how it's calculated. So I just wanted you to know that you really weren't that far off. And I know Ricky Adams went through and spent months working on the SLDS and chasing down kids and everything else, so I'm sure his reporting is correct. He was at all the schools meeting with everybody trying to get this worked out and dealing with the state and the software bugs. So I think we have really good numbers. I don't think there's anything that's way out of, the numbers are way off at all.
Any questions?
I'd like to say that you're just amazing. I don't know how you even deal with this. It's incomprehensible. So were these the numbers that we got the scare right before town meeting that they were way off? So
That's when they actually were close. They had just sent us the final, which was, I want to say it was version 12 or version 13 of the ADM, which is used to do the equalized pupil. But yeah, we just kept getting version, and there were big changes between the versions. And then, of course, then the legislature changed the yields the day before your town meeting, which changed everything. I will let you know I've since received an email that the yields have changed again. So what we gave out at town meeting, but last year it was May before they finally decided on the final yields. They have to play with the budget and see what they need for money and what's in the eds fund and what they expect to get from taxes and sales tax and, you know, fuel tax and everything else. So
Is the latest figure better or worse?
I'm trying to remember. I think it is better than what they gave us. What was it, March 1st?
Yeah. March 1st.
Yeah. I think actually it is better because the budgets that were submitted, they thought were running close to 4%, and they dropped when they got in more budgets. And so they don't need as much money, so the yields improved. So.
Any questions for me?
Poverty seems like a pretty low number.
It is any student who lives in a family who gets SNAP or food stamps. It used to be called food stamps.
So
I think it's SNAP now.
Somewhat direct certified, but not everyone gets free and reduced lunch.
Correct, but these are the ones that actually their families are receiving food stamps. Yes. It is low, but yes, those, not the free and reduced general population. The families actually have to be in a poverty situation. So
This works out to something like 40.
yeah.
And don't explain this if it takes any more than 4 seconds.
Okay.
The .94817 equalizing, Why do they have another equalization number?
They have that is a formula that is calculated every year, and it's to equalize all of the schools.
Okay.
So
good enough.
every school has that. equalized
.94817.
this year,
Yes.
because that lowers what. I mean, I can see a certain amount of logic for everything else
Until that.
Yeah.
that, and then all of a sudden, instead of having 264, you down to 250,
Yeah.
which makes
But
the
they
whole
do
the number seem totally fake.
right. But they do that to everyone in the state, and it's like when they equalize tax rates. They have a formula for that. Now they equalize students. They put that into place when this formula went into play. They figured out a way to equalize students across the state. So we're all paid supposedly on the same playing field. It is
I'm just saying, well, if you do it everywhere, it doesn't seem like it does anything. at
Right.
all.
other than increase our taxes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
The biggest question I have about this is the difference between the first two lines.
Yeah,
Westminster's enrollment with the November 2nd census
right. That
is
is
274. It seems pretty straightforward. Now, why does at the same time, which is FY19 fall census,
right, and that ended before November 2nd. Plus, when the enrollment is counted, it counts all the students in the classrooms in this building, whether or not they are Westminster residents. And I know we have special needs classes that we have students that move from other districts within our SU, and they may not be going to their normal school, what they would go in their community. They would actually be coming to
so
Westminster.
they would appear in the November 2nd fall census?
Yes, in the enrollment. Yep. So when Doug and Trish are counting students, they're actually looking at actual students in each of the classrooms. But when it gets reported to the state, it's reported by town of residence. And that pulls out any of those children that are not Westminster residents. And we didn't used to have that, but we do now, because we do move students to the best location for their instruction. It may not be in their town of residence.
And we don't have Westminster kids, we don't have an equal number of Westminster kids going to Rockingham or...
And
Exactly.
that I don't know, but I know there are kids that get moved. Yeah. And they would be counted on yours. So if they were going to one of the Rockingham schools, you would pick them up. They wouldn't show up on your enrollment, but they would show up on the SLDS system reporting, because it would grab every kid. But also, I'm pretty sure the cutoff for the SLDS was the first 30 days. And November 2nd is past the 30 days, and I know kids move in and move out more frequently than they did even when I went. I mean, when I went to school, no one moved, but that was a long, long time ago. But yes, your enrollment changes during the year like everyone's does.
Sure. And I think, I mean, like, I'm looking back, we do this like October 1st count. It's like
Yep.
one of these things that we do, and then like, pulling the numbers this year, because, the fall census is sort of in quotes, like Edie said, because they didn't do the fall census in the same way. So pulling the numbers from our student management system at that time, and like, all of the numbers are all, they're all within like one or two, which is, kids do move in and kids do move out. I can't really track how you know what I mean? Like, and some of what Edie's saying about, we do have some students who, you know, come from other schools. We send some kids out. I don't know if,
Yeah.
you know, how those show up or don't show up in this.
They would be, if you would count them in your enrollment, because they'd be in your building. But if they were, let's say, Rockingham students, they would be pulled out once it went to the state and the state reporting, because Rockingham gets to count them as their equalized pupil, not Westminster. So you're going to have a difference between line 1 and line 2. And when they did the statewide longitudinal data system reporting, because there were so many changes and problems with the software and everything else, I don't think that it went much past the 30 days. I don't think it made it to the 40 days. But I may be wrong. Everything I've read sounds like it's 30 days, but they just kept changing things, and there were new iterations that were sent into the state. It could have been so much simpler if they had allowed that to go on, but let us continue to report the census so we had actual data that was usable for budget season, but they didn't give us that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've become increasingly aware of is that a very modest difference in because of the way the taxation formulas are done, this makes all the difference in the world in how people are taxed.
Absolutely.
And it's more important than the spending.
Yes.
And so that makes it all the more important to get the numbers right, to figure out how the state is doing the calculations. And thank you so much for doing
Yep.
this. And make sure that the state is using the numbers that are real.
Right.
So anyway, going forward, we'll just want to make absolutely certain that we have the right numbers and that we're giving the right numbers to the state.
Absolutely, and I think at the time that we were working on budgets, the assumption was that the state reporting system was working. And it wasn't until Ricky and I sat down and started going through everything that we realized how off we were. And, you know, the first submission he sent in, there were over 5,200 errors. That's how much data is in this report. And that's why the poor IT people got stuck with it, because who have never done anything with enrollment or ADM or equalized pupils, because they were the only ones who could manipulate the data in the computer system. And I know he spent hours and hours and weeks and weeks and weeks on this, making sure everything was correct. And like I said, the state sent us 12 different versions. I'm pretty sure it was 12 different versions of our average daily membership, and they didn't even get it fixed until it was pretty much time for a town meeting, which is too late. It's really too late. That means everything that was published statewide was off. A lot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's obviously took a while to put this together, and it's a really useful, useful to see, and useful, I think, next year as we go into the process to try to figure out, to sort of second guess what
Right.
the equalized pupil count is going to be. so we'll have a good idea.
And I'm sure that they're going to continue with the statewide longitudinal data reporting. And I'm hoping they've got all the bugs worked out this year, so next year we don't have the same issues that we experienced this year.
Okay.
Note how that may be more complicated if there's multiple schools in multiple towns.
Yeah, but I think in the basic premise is likely to be the same.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if this was that hard in one town,
It'll
Yeah.
work like the high school.
figure.
The high school sets a tax rate and then it's broken down by the
Yeah.
equalized pupils in each of the member towns. So that's basically how it's going to work. So.
But I think what you were getting at is then you've got to make sure that you get the right fake census figures and so on from each
Right.
principal,
Yes.
from the multiple schools.
And make sure that every student has the right town of residence.
exactly.
Yeah,
Ay, ay, ay.
yeah,
Right.
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And it wouldn't matter so much, except that that's how the taxes. Okay, here we are at committees.
Bless
I'm
you.
not sure we have any committee reports because it wasn't long ago that we met. Any committee reports? No. Okay. WNESU, I believe, is meeting. When was it? I can't remember. No, it's not meeting for a while. It met last week.
But I'm
Yes.
not going to be there that time, so are we saying you're going?
What's this going?
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
don't have to vote on that at all. We just like
No.
okay.
Okay, and so then let's go on to new business for discussion, and that's the Westminster Food Service. This is something, Elise, you asked to be for us to discuss.
Thank you. So Harley has been working on this for a while. And the parameters for, it's called universal free meals, but what it is it's free lunch for the whole district, for the whole school. At this point, you're one district. The problem is you have to have 40% direct certification. I think our free and reduced number is higher than that. But right now, we have 66 students that are direct certification, and the enrollment's 195, because that's taking off the pre-K. So this amounts to 34.4% direct certification, and it doesn't qualify for, it's called community eligibility provision. We had talked about a little bit, just playing with it, is it might be worth thinking about provision 2 for breakfast only. The thing about providing a free meal, it would create a drop in the revenue for breakfast, about 20 to 30%. But if we offer the breakfast to everyone, that might offset the loss of revenue, because we would get a certain amount of money from the state. So, and then we talked a little bit about breakfast after the bell. So when the students come, they can eat, when it's time for a snack, 8:30, 8:45, the class goes down all together. They get a snack, or they bring their snack from home, and they all eat 15 minutes together. So first grade would go down at 10 of 9, second grade would go down at 9, 9:10, 9:20, and so everyone would have breakfast or snack. So we did talk about the possibility of doing that, but in the end, the concern is that it would end up costing our budget, costing us to pay some in. So we're not, we're really not, unless we can really get the numbers and come to you with the exact numbers of what it would cost to the school board, to the school budget. We're just not ready to jump into it. Grafton is our second highest school with a high level of free and reduced lunch. They don't qualify. because it has to be direct certified. So we're up to like 60% free and reduced lunch in Grafton, but direct certified, we're not hitting that 40%
What does direct
threshold.
certified mean?
It means that these students are directly, when you sign up for SNAP or when you sign up for food stamps, that directly goes into the school, the database where we get that information from. And sometimes, you know, many times we have families that qualify for free or reduced, but they're not direct certified. So that's a real bummer. Now, we do have one school that does qualify, and that is Central. But even with those numbers, we get, so we are like maybe 40 or, we're closer to 60% direct certified there. But they only give you, very similar, $1, $1.6 or $1, 1 point something percent, so that the revenue loss from the students, the 30% that are paying, we would lose that revenue. So it would cost us more to pay for all, say, 100 students at 1.6%. The money they would give us, it would not cover those students that would normally pay. So we have to be very cognizant of the impact it would put on the school budgets. And it's a little more complicated than just, it's a great idea. There's districts that are doing it. Brattleboro's doing it. But I think those taxpayers are paying some of that burden.
No, I'm going to in a minute if it's
That's how Brattleboro was able to do that.
You can make that decision that we would, you know, so we would 70% of the school we'd get 1.64 something percent of a free meal, $1.6 for a meal, but only for 70%, and then we would have to pay the other 30 at 1.6. You know, it wouldn't be the $2.50, but we'd end up having to pay that percentage that is not direct certified. So consequently, it would cost us. It would impact the budget. It would impact Westminster. But we're really thinking seriously about jumping into the breakfast business over Central. So so we're really thinking of starting there as a kind of a pilot, and then really crunch the numbers in our other schools. We can do it by district. We sort of thought about doing it like all the Rockingham schools. So then if or when or whatever happens, if you're a district with Athens Grafton, we might be able to put those two schools together because you'd be a district. And then we could, you know, figure out what that would cost. And that would be another thing to look at, because your direct cert of 34, but theirs with 60 might, you know what I mean? It would certainly meet the 40% threshold. Then we would come to you and say, okay, we can do this, but this is how much it would cost. Are we willing to put that in our budget? And so it's all about the revenue we would be losing, and but the benefits we'd be gaining. So we'll keep you posted. We're really serious about going breakfast in Central.
It's great that you're looking at those figures too, though, and not letting a potential opportunity slide.
No, I wish it was easier. I
Okay.
thought for sure it'd be easy. You know, Central, why aren't we doing this? It's not. It's a little more complex.
Just to clarify, though, you said at the last minute that if we were with Athens Grafton, they were at 60%. But earlier you said they were 60% free reduced lunch, but they don't qualify in direct cert either.
No.
So it's not 60%. They're under the 40%, and we're under the 40%. Together,
Right.
we would still be under the 40%.
But it's possible that they could help. Their numbers could help us. You know, I mean, it's possible. You're right, but you know.
So I just want to clarify. There
Yeah.
were two different statements. I just wanted to clarify. that.
Right. Well,
I mean, it
you're
might be
right.
economically somehow better to have more people in the pool, but the
Well-
two schools together don't qualify under direct cert,
No.
and
Unless we
individually don't.
really, you know.
has to be individual.
Yeah, but we end up having to go through, look for homeless students that are not, haven't qualified yet, students that are foster students that we don't. And so there's ways to look at it, but
Maybe close.
yeah, you're right, but it's a little more complex than just their numbers and our numbers.
Or at least
So I was going to say, well, I asked for this to be put on here. Well, Doug and I have had a conversation, and he said the situation might be better with the board because, what's happened, I guess they're a couple $1,000s short of, and I wanted to ask you some questions about that, but that there are instances where you have children that usually pay for lunch or whatever, and then there's an instance where my son's got sent in. I told him, get some salad dressing at the salad bar because I don't have anything to send you with. And so he asked for salad dressing, and they're about to give it to him and said, are you home lunch or and they said, well, you can't have it because you're supposed to pay for lunch. He had a home lunch that day. So to have children kind of be shamed, standing there asking for something and not being given food, is very bad. Is, I think, horrible. And something came up a couple of years ago where we had children being denied a hot lunch because they owed $10 on there. And so once the board found out about that, we said, we can't have that. And I feel that this is the same situation that, I understand that, you're supposed to pay for lunch, but that the, students can be turned away and say no. So that situation, I just wanted to address that. And Doug and I have talked about that, and he said the kitchen staff is having a hard time of things because, so they finally started saying, no, we can't, in all cases, whatever. But, I feel like you have children that are being shamed, and that we shouldn't say no that a child can have food.
So one of the things that we had talked about today, this very day, right now, outstanding bills that we have from families who pay equals $7,000, $7,100 across the district, across the SU. We're hoping that we'll get a majority of it back, but our policy is very dated. Our policy, the SU's policy on billing and having outstanding debt is very dated. And the bottom line is, it used to be they would give you a sun butter and jelly sandwich instead of a hot lunch. But it's like Harley said today, that sandwich cost 83 cents. A piece of pizza cost 14 cents. And I can remember, I was a principal way back, I can remember a third grader just crying because he wanted pizza. He didn't want the sun butter. And who can blame him? Everybody else is eating pizza. But I would say to Harley, if he knew that somebody was denied salad dressing, that doesn't make sense. And I feel badly that that happened because it shouldn't happen.
Right, and I do feel it's a little unfair to bring up a specific incident and call that the truth for all instances, because the truth is most of the time we're more generous than we even should be with fruits and vegetables, or that. Mostly we're giving away more, and I don't feel like it's right to go into the conversation around that particular incident.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if I was going to bring up this specific incident, but I felt that it was kind of telling that, and then,
right.
then
So
we
some
can
of
talk
it's
about it.
Sure. I mean, and so the basic premise around if you're buying lunch, you get the stuff that goes with the lunch, and if you're not, then you don't. Is there? But in this particular instance, I think there was other factors, just around timing and them cleaning up and those sorts of things. And we certainly don't aim to shame anybody, and that's regrettable. That's always regrettable.
It is, but one thing we can say is Harley's looking at the policy, and that will be coming up. But on the opposite side of that page, the schools have to pay the debt that is left by families that don't. So we send home notices and letters, and this has nothing to do with any particular situation, but I know right now across the district it's $7,000. And I think it's hard for parents because sometimes it piles up. We have to help them by making a payment plan, but a lot of them are, not a lot, but there's been parents that have been very cavalier. Yeah, okay. My kids ate it. What are you going to do? You come back and get it?
Right, it's a hard situation,
Yeah.
I understand. I know
Yeah.
Doug said something about like $3,000, that we're out right now from people not paying. So I guess I was interested in also finding out where those numbers are, not specifically people, but to talk to Harley and you and kind of see where the loss is, where we're missing money, and see how we can, how much, if we put
We can't
some.
stop. We can't stop feeding kids. We would never do that.
Right.
I have a question. So I know a situation where a kiddo is a free reduced lunch kiddo, but they bring a lunch from home. But if they get a milk, they have to pay for the milk because they're not getting the full. Is there?
That's
I was
USD
gonna say some of that's
regs.
federal regs.
So those are like. So
beyond
if I'm thinking about the $7,000 that's owed. How much of that is owed by parents that are receiving free and
I would
reduced
say
meals?
probably not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. I would argue that most of our free and reduced students get the free and reduced lunch. They get the whole lunch. But it is something we have to keep an eye on because in the end it will take away from our educational programming to make it right. And I think you cannot go into a new year with that kind of debt. So we do look at it, but I would continue to go to the principal and mention when things, when students aren't feeling,
Also, I appreciate you looking at the numbers, and I'd like, for Harley, at some point maybe, when Harley could come in and
Yeah,
kind of
he's
say, this is
wonderful.
where, the money is.
He's wonderful, and we have looked at it. We've looked at it for all of them. And the same thing happens when I talk about the grant, how the whole road's the grant. We get $2 million, but I can only spend X amount per student, and I can spend more per student for a Grafton student because of their level of poverty, but I have to spend more money for a Westminster student because there's more kids. So I spend less per kid times more kids, more students, and I have more money times less students. So they have these kinds of things for everything. For everything. Food being one of them as well.
Okay. Well, I did want to bring it up because, like I said, Doug and I talked about it. He said, well, maybe this is something for the board to, because Harley's been wrestling with it and you all have been, and, like if we look down the line for contingency or, just something. So if we can get more information as you go ahead, and I appreciate you looking into the breakfast and trying to get food for kids.
We would start.
And to clarify in the milk situation, it's like I think this goes back to a Jack Nicholson 5 Easy Pieces for those old enough. But the kid could get the whole lunch
Right.
and hold the food and hold the fruit and
toss it.
end up with his milk. It's a waste of resources, but
Well, yeah, technically.
I mean the kids take the. They have to-
He's got to take
Take the
3
whole-
of the
yes,
5, and
yeah.
one of them has to be a fruit or
Yeah,
vegetable.
so it's hold the lettuce and hold and end up with the toast at the end. If you remember that reference, look it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Elise, for bringing that up. Let's go on to old business. There is, the first item here is a discussion of the upcoming Union Elementary District organizational meeting, which is Wednesday the 10th. I think it's at 6, if I got my timing right.
Yes.
And at the Bellows Falls Union High School auditorium, I think. And that is a meeting where voters from Westminster, Athens, and Grafton are invited to come in, and the Agency of Education sent out an agenda for that meeting, warned it, and sent out, or asked the superintendent to warn it and sent out the agenda. The agenda has 11 articles in it, which I'll just read so that we can all keep it in our minds. The first is to elect a temporary presiding officer and clerk of the newly merged district from among qualified voters of the district. Second is to adopt Robert's rules or other rules of order. Third is to elect officers of the district from the qualified voters, and the officers to be elected are to serve a term of 1 year or until successors are elected and qualified, and they are the moderator, the clerk, and the treasurer. The fourth is to determine the date and location of the first annual meeting of the district. The fifth is to determine whether or not the district budget and other questions are determined by Australian ballot or not, or in a town meeting type meeting of the voters of the 3 towns. The sixth is to determine whether or not to elect members of the district board by Australian ballot. So we could settle the budget by Australian ballot, or the district board, the elected members of the district board by Australian ballot. 7, to determine and approve compensation, if any, to be paid to officers of the district. 8, to determine and approve compensation, if any, to be paid to members of the district board. 9, to establish provisions for payment of any expense incurred by the district before it becomes operational July 1 of this year. 10, to authorize the district to borrow money pending receipt of payments from the state education fund. And 11, to determine whether to authorize the school board of directors to provide mail notice to residents about the annual reports. So that's those are the articles of this warned meeting a little more than a week from now, and each one of these articles is subject to a vote of the people who attend, and make a decision to one way or the other, or avoid making a decision. It's up to the voters. That meeting is a week from tomorrow. There's another element I want to talk about with this, but any discussion about this?
Well, I'm wondering, does anybody have this that they can print out and we can make copies?
Oh, yeah. I think it may already be on the WNESU website. The warning for an agenda for the organizational meeting. Lynn, is that there? I think it is.
I was just wondering if for the meeting here we can.
I don't see it.
I'll just check and make sure that this is the same.
If it's
for
not,
April 10th.
it certainly should be.
Just make sure. Oh, yeah, just make sure it's the same.
It was determined by nobody in this district. It was determined by the Secretary of Education.
I'm looking at the superintendent's blog.
Would you like to, how many?
Would other people like copies?
If it's not warned on the website, is it then can't happen?
Oh, it was in the paper. No, we had to put it in the paper.
But it has to be, there's a bunch of rules as to for any public meeting. It has to be in the paper, it has to be
Yeah,
on
I
school,
think
it has to be at every school, at the town offices, and it has to be on that website where you're not supposed to have it. If it's not properly warned.
I think I have what is required here.
We've been through this before.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
The warning the notice, that is this here, has to have the date, hour, and place of the meeting, and it has to be posted in one public place in each town and published in at least one newspaper circulating within the Union District. Publication and posting shall be made not more than 40 days nor fewer than 30 days before the date of the meeting. The new district shall bear the cost of giving notice, and the Secretary of Education shall draw the warning for the organizational meeting. That came in this sort of directive from the agency. It doesn't say anything about the website.
But has it been posted as you just said?
Beg your pardon?
Has it been posted within 30 days, as you just said?
Oh, has it been posted? I believe it has.
Yeah, it's been in the paper.
Been in the paper.
It's been posted on the website on March 22nd. It's right here. It's under WNE Union Elementary upcoming meeting.
It's supposed to be within 30 days, but then it said also within at a public.
One public place in each of the 3 towns.
Has that happened?
Oh, you mean over on the upper left or the upper right?
It's just right on the WNE's website.
Yeah, I'm looking for the agenda though. Oh, no.
Posted on March 22nd.
Yeah.
WNE Union Elementary upcoming meeting.
Is the agenda there?
It's the warning articles.
Yeah, it's the warning of the meeting.
And Lynn, do you know for certain? I think.
Yeah, I wasn't looking far enough down.
Do you know for certain that it was posted in a public place in each of the towns?
Yeah, it was posted in both the Brattleboro Reformer and the Eagle News.
Right, but in a public place, as in the town hall. You know whether it was posted.
Yeah,
It's
we-
usually posted at the various school buildings and maybe the town halls.
So we fax them to the town hall and they put them right up. They get the copy right from the fax machine and they hang it up. I'm sorry, I didn't look far enough, but it had to be like, I don't know, 30 days or something. And I was looking closer to the date as opposed to when we posted it
Right,
on the
right.
22nd. Thank you, Josh.
Where do you find it on the website, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, well, it's right there and I just
Right
didn't
where?
have it low
I mean, is
enough. Okay, slide down. See, I kept looking here for this 8.
That's WNE's.
So it was
Yeah.
posted that day, but there it was, the date should be
there
on
it
it,
is.
but there is April 10th.
Okay. Yeah.
But the date should have been.
Now, just for your information, I know that the Westminster Select Board has a lot of interest in this and has postponed their regular meeting so that the Select Board can come to this organizational meeting. And I think it's appropriate, wise to encourage anyone who has any interest in this to come to the meeting a week from tomorrow. If this board has an interest, we can talk about whether there's any particular way we might want to approach any of these articles. I'm happy to let the democratic process work as it will, in which may or may not be exactly as the Secretary of Education and/or the legislature envisions. But if anyone has anything to say about the articles and the proceedings, I'll say a couple of things. Some organizational meetings have already happened, and one of them is happening tonight in the Wyndham Southeast forced emerge area. Among the organizational meetings that have happened so far, the electorate have taken a number of different approaches. Some have, I don't believe any have approved Australian ballots for voting on budgets or electing board members at this point. They have chosen, at least at this point, to continue with open meeting formats for any of those votes. I could be wrong, but I know at least most of the organizational meetings, and I think all, have made that choice. Some of the organizational meetings have decided not to give the new boards, the merged boards, any authority to make any spending, because those voters didn't feel that that district was real yet until, and therefore shouldn't be able to borrow money or spend money until the old districts were dissolved, if that happened. So that was some choices. In other organizational meetings, voters have passed motions to recommend that the merger not happen. And in other meetings, I believe, in one meeting anyway, the voters approved a motion to try to allow the district to continue with a sort of a decentralized governance, where the towns would continue to have town boards, but still be part of a district that was governed together in some fashion. I don't know as people knew exactly what, had a complete vision of that, but that was a motion that some version of that passed in one of the organization meetings. So who knows what'll happen? But anyway, that's it.
Is Larry Slayson going to be coming tonight?
Larry Slayson is not coming tonight. He is, obviously, let's see. He is, I believe, going to be hired by the Athens and Grafton boards tomorrow night, or at least they're going to consider hiring him to help advise them on how to proceed with this. He had, I went and talked to him after I had a meeting with the chair of Athens and the chair of Grafton about this organizational meeting. And he had a couple of pieces of advice which he shared at that point. One was that he felt at that point, and that was back on March 19, that it was not, we didn't necessarily need to think of a game plan for the organizational meeting at that point, because other organizational meetings would be happening prior. In fact, at that point, all the other organizational meetings would be happening prior to ours, which was the last one, and we could learn by example about what other districts were doing. The question also came up about whether what would happen if things didn't go smoothly and voters had some objection to one or the other of these articles or the timing is extremely tight here. There's very, very little opportunity to get a board elected to the new district and then have that board be able to figure out a budget for the new district and warn it ahead of July 1. It's an extremely, extremely tight deadline. If the board does not come up with a budget right away, or if the towns in their commingled vote against the budget, the question came up, what happens if there is no budget approved, or what happens if there's no functional board? And at this point, it's an unknown. There's no answer to that. Typically, if a district has not approved a budget, it drops down to 87% of the previous year's budget. But in this case, there would be no previous budget to drop down to. The Senate passed a bill that would come up with a figure for districts that didn't actually have an approved budget, but that is it's unlikely that will have much meaning at this point, because that's just the Senate. It has to be negotiated with the House, and where all that legislation is going, if anywhere right now, is anybody's guess. So right now, the AOE doesn't have an answer to what would happen if this doesn't all go according to plan. Let's see. So there's that. And then there's the question of a transitional board. Originally, and in fact, in the so-called Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School Articles of Agreement, which is not really Articles of Agreement because no one agreed to it, but it's what the Agency of Education has communicated to us, that is supposed to happen. It says that there is to be a transitional board, and forgive me, most of you know this already, but there is to be a transitional board which is to meet no later than 14 days after the organizational meeting, which is next Wednesday. And the transitional board has a couple of duties. One is to work on a draft budget, and the other is to prepare and warn the following items as one or more district meetings for the new district. And the main one is the election of initial board members. So there has to be, this transitional board has to get together and warn an election for initial board members for the new district. Then, once that warning is posted, 6 Mondays, that's, if in the organizational meeting, the voters approve an Australian ballot for those new board members, 6 Mondays have to go by before that election, and people have to take out petitions. People who want to run for that board have to take out petitions. And then that board has to come up with, approve the draft budget that the transitional board presumably has worked on, and warn that for voters. If in the organizational meeting next week, the voters do not approve an Australian ballot and decide to vote on the budget in an open meeting, town meeting type situation, then that that can happen after being warned 30 to 40 days, I believe. Correct? Is that your impression, David? 30 to 40 days. It would happen 30 to 40 days after it was warned. In any case, both scenarios involve a getting our time is of the essence in both scenarios, but especially with the Australian ballot. The transitional board that's the duties of the transitional board. As the Agency of Education defined it, the members of the transitional board are the chair and the clerk of each of the forming districts. That is the chair and clerk of Westminster, the chair and clerk of Athens, and the chair and clerk of Grafton, but not the chair and clerk right now. It's the chair and clerk as of July 1 last year. And it presents some interesting problems because none of those chairs and clerks agreed to do this. And one, the chair of Grafton, July 1 last year, is no longer even on the board. So, and I should say that, at least from this chair's point of view, I was elected by the town to serve on this board and do as good a job as I can on this board. I wasn't elected to be involved in a process to dissolve this board, sell the school to a new district, and work in the new district. So what the Agency of Education envisions as my role doesn't jive with what I envision or understand to be my role. And furthermore, the town voted against merging so I'm reluctant to be on a transition board because it doesn't feel like that is my role. But in any event, the other thing about the transition board is that these articles of agreement do give this board the opportunity to appoint anybody else to be on the transition board. So I wanted to bring that up because if there are people here who have an interest in being on the transition board, now is our opportunity to appoint them. And David Clark and I have had a lot of discussions about this, about whether it is wise to go ahead and create the transitional board and participate in the transitional board, or whether it's not, or how it jives with what we understand to be our roles at this point. And I have no judgment about anyone else being on the transitional board. I see that it could be an appropriate and smart thing to do. It doesn't feel appropriate for me, but I don't have any judgment about anyone else participating in that. So anyway, that being said, is there anyone who would like to be on the transitional board for the newly merged district? Or have any ideas for someone who might like to be on the transitional board? And again, this transitional board has a fairly short duty. It is there to work on a preliminary budget, a draft budget, and it's there to warn the election for a permanent board or an elected board. Any interest? Any thoughts? David?
I want to ask a question which may not immediately seem directly related. Are you going to sign teacher contracts tonight?
Tonight? We don't have teacher contracts to sign.
My understanding is that teacher contracts need to be signed by April 15th. Am I correct, Lynn? Okay.
No, I'm sorry. They do need to be, and then they're handed out and they have a month to return them.
Okay.
You're right, you're correct.
And I raised the question, David, because it seems to me that if you need to sign teacher contracts on or before April 15, that will mean that your board will need to hold a special meeting in order to meet your legal obligation. It seems to me that if you're going to hold one special meeting, why not put two items on the agenda? One, of course, being to sign those contracts, and the other be to appoint a transitional board. And I think they're both very important. And I quite frankly think that you could do it next Wednesday, the 10th, say at 5 o'clock ahead of the organizational meeting at 6 o'clock. Or, of course, any other time, but that certainly would be the latest, really, that you could settle the issue of what your transitional board is going to look like.
Interesting, David. And thank you for, you had brought up that teacher contract discussion earlier, and somehow or other, how come if it's required by April 15, we're not doing it right now? Is that something?
Yeah, I just don't think they're ready.
Yeah.
I think
Act 46 would probably be
Does
a
the board
succinct
chair
answer to your
normally
question.
sign, or just the superintendent?
honestly don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
I don't remember having a meeting in the past to sign.
No, I think it's
Just
just
the
the
superintendent.
superintendent sign.
The superintendent's.
I don't think the board.
Each district does it differently, and I was not here.
A teacher contract requires a signature of the teacher, the superintendent, the principal, and the board chair. And I would suggest that in order for the board chair's signature to be legitimate, he would need to be authorized to sign by his board. So I do believe that you need a meeting to authorize the signing of those teacher contracts, because you may have a disagreement with your superintendent over which contracts get signed, and certainly you want to have your school board's consent before you sign those contracts.
Where is the high school in the teacher contract? High school board in the teacher contract?
Well, the high school has a meeting Monday night. Lynn has the agendas. I do not know if teacher contracts are on it.
Yeah, I'm texting Chris now. I don't know how they do it in this district because of the 6-9.
It's your first year. It's Chris's first year too.
I'm not seeing it. Maybe we can.
Past practice, I understand that it becomes an agenda item
Okay.
before April 15th. And thank you for these.
Yeah, and I mean it becomes, well, thank you, Dave. It's an important point for number one, because we want to do what the law says, and if it requires being done by April 15, we want to have that done by April 15. And also, what entity signs those teacher contracts is also has some bearing. That is it the town district? Is it a newly merged district? Who are the teachers working for? Who has the authority to spend the money to pay the teachers? So
So Doug has some artifacts here. So what it looks like is the superintendent signs the contract. It's handed out to the employees. They have, I think, a month or 30 days to send it back, to give it back, signed. Then the principal signs, then the board chair signs after the fact. These were signed May 30th, 2018. Okay. So, and I'm talking to Chris now, but it looks like the superintendent signs it first, employee, principal, hands it into the principal signs it, goes to the school board chair. Which complicates things.
David.
I can give you some further insight. Under the default Articles of Agreement, which are now called Articles of Agreement, those contracts become incumbent on the successive board, which I think is one good reason to sign it now, because your staff in this building needs the security of knowing that they have a contract come hell or high water, which hopefully won't be coming here anytime soon. With regard to signing, I believe Lynn is correct about the sequencing, but there's some history with that, and that is that previously board chairs had signed those contracts and then waited for teachers to sign them. And it was felt that disadvantaged schools where you had teachers who might be shopping around looking for their best deal, because you were locked in for at least 30 days, and in cases where an extension was granted, you were still locked in. Once you had signed that contract, it became a de facto extension. But I believe that if you check the minutes from March or April last year, that they will reveal that rosters are approved by school boards.
Yeah, you're right. I do remember that.
Right.
Yeah. And I said to, Chris said, I said, does the board chair sign the teacher contracts before they go out? And he said, yes. So either it is the roster or it's the actual contracts, but we have neither tonight, so.
Yeah, I
that
think
was
the
a good
roster
catch.
comes for approval, and then the contracts can be signed at
Yeah.
at a later date, but I think.
I was just asked Rick, or wondering whether we could figure out when it was last year that we approved the teacher
Right.
roster.
I don't know that Rhonda's been given the list yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about this time. It looks like March. We did, according to these notes anyways, we did something weird where we like rescinded a roster and then reapproved the roster
Yeah,
or
we
something
did.
like that. So
Yeah.
it was in this
No,
March.
I think because I hadn't done my oath of office, maybe,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Back in March, I
Yeah.
neglected to go to the town hall. And so we had to redo it maybe or something.
Yeah.
So that's right, that was back in March.
Yeah. Well, it might also have been
Is that-
the art and reading teacher debacle of 2018 as well. So.
So what happens if no one steps forward for this new board?
It's an unknown question. And it doesn't have to be necessarily someone from the school board. The school board can appoint somebody. If the school board does not appoint anybody, at least according to the Agency of Education, the chair and clerk, dead or alive, from last year, are the transitional board. So, take it as you will. Okay. Anything more to say on this subject at this point? I think I'm going to let David's idea of having a meeting to sign teacher contracts or approve a roster or something hang for a minute until we come to the end, figuring out the date of the next meeting. Because that's an important one, and if we have to do it before the April 15, then we need to do that. And I think we're probably not alone in that problem. among the districts of Wyndham Northeast. So with that question left hanging, any other else anyone has to say about the organizational meeting next week? No. Okay. So let's move on to 8B, and that is a question about or an update on the Compass School, which has had a problem recently regarding its nonprofit standing. And Rick, could you fill us in on where things are at?
Should I stand out there or sit here is fine? Here?
Yeah.
It was a problem with filing these 990 forms, and we knew we were behind on them this fall. We had all the paperwork to the accountant, and he had yet to send them in, and they were all sent in along with the reinstatement of the tax exempt status as of today. So it was being taken care of, and it's officially out. And we were told that it's a pretty straightforward process to get retroactive reinstatement. It was a clerical problem with personnel.
Any questions for Rick about this? This district tuitions students to Compass School, and it's obviously important for the district to know that the Compass School is healthy financially and is taking care of the paperwork it needs to take care of. There was an article about this in the Vermont Digger a week ago or earlier this week sometime. And so it felt important to me that we hear where things are at.
Just to reassure people, it wasn't filed because there was any fiscal question marks. And in fact, we had a big audit before that praised our fiscal accountability. It was just got dropped because of personnel issues. But we are going to put the 990 forms on our website in the next couple of days. So if anybody wants to see those, they'll be there well before the IRS puts them out to the public. So if anybody's interested in seeing the accounting of it, that's there. And I never realized how important they were. Apparently, they are the one public document on nonprofits that is publicly accessible. I didn't know that was the way they were used typically. So they'll be there if people want to look at them.
Thank you, Rick. Any further questions? Any appointments or resignations? Nope. Okay.
I'm still going back and forth with Chris. Now he's saying that we're not going to approve rosters, just contracts. And so I'm going to get the date. I mean, if they have to be done before the 15th, then we did Rockingham the other night, and I don't think they got theirs. And of course, we've got the high school coming up. So
You did, as in you had the meeting.
right.
The
We
meeting.
had the meeting.
They didn't approve a teacher
Right.
roster. Right.
So
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you. Director's comments.
Oh, I don't think so. Just thanks for looking into the food program stuff.
I just have a little update on that. So you're right. Together, the two schools would be 70% direct cert, but you're right. It's based on, it's not so much the two schools, but it's based on the population altogether. So even though we're 70, percent, it's 70% of adding their 100, whatever, 98, 200 students plus their 60 students. So you're right. They're 35.6 and you're 34.4.
So you can't add up the two.
I get that. I was just wondering if I didn't have to,
Yeah.
if you were one district, did I have to divide it? If we could do school and
No, it
school
still would
and
be in
add
the
them.
30%,
Yeah.
30 something like
It'd
that.
be about 34 or 30, yeah. So you're right. Sorry about that. I was really hoping, but.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Well, since we don't know what's going to happen next week, I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure serving on the board with you. Thank you, Edie, Lynn, and Doug for giving us all these reports. And thank you to Fact TV. That's it.
Yeah, I concur with Elise. I mean, it's odd to think that, all the years the Westminster Board has been representative of great collaboration among community members and people working well together, in addition with the Northeast Board, that this may just disappear suddenly. But it has been an honor to serve, and I appreciate working with you all and over the years with everyone else who served the community.
Great. Okay. Then why don't we talk about agenda items for next board meeting and when the next board meeting is? At a minimum, Lynn, I think we should warn, because we're all going to, I assume, be at the organizational meeting. That should be warned as a Westminster School Board meeting, as should, I imagine, Athens and Grafton, just because all the board members will be there. Right?
Right. And I believe that piece has been warned. But the Athens Grafton is having a meeting on the 4th, the joint, to discuss certain things, but we're also going to focus on that day, so we don't have to meet on the 11th, which was our regular time.
So now comes the question of these teacher rosters, teacher contracts, and if it becomes necessary, and if David is correct that an action needs to be taken in that regard before April 15, then we should be meeting prior to April 15, and it seems like an appropriate time would be just before the organizational meeting. I'm not thrilled about having another meeting, but that would be the least painful, I think. So is that can you can maybe we'll talk tomorrow morning, or get a word about what that situation is fairly quickly, so we could all know, and that meeting could be warned.
Definitely. So Chris is saying he is just going to do contracts, and he prefers the board to sign every contract. So I think if this board wants to approve and sign those contracts, we need to have them ready next week on April 10th at 5 o'clock. We would meet. I could see about getting a room in the high school. They have a conference room we could use.
Right. Or we could meet in the library.
We could meet in the library. It's open meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to ask Larry Slayson, or?
I think that it's. I don't think we need to spend lawyer money on this. I think that it's.
Well, I just meant for the organizational meeting that was coming right up after.
Oh, for the organization meeting, will be at the organization meeting. Yes.
Will you talk to him again, like this week?
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So why don't we then schedule our next meeting at 5 at the high school?
Definitely. High school library.
Yeah. And the reason why it should be done, if it needs to be done before the 15th, that's the most convenient time to do it. So yes.
Great. So on the agenda, we'll put contracts. Did you want to put on anything else?
I think that David has an excellent idea to say appoint transitional board, if that
Is it board or just 2 members?
to appoint transitional board members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Dave.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other items of business? Okay. And see you all next week.